This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Southampton Select Board for March 17th, 2026 at about 6:02. We will have FinCom, but you don't have a quorum yet, so we'll wait until you have everybody here. So with that, let's stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Good. All right. Would somebody mind grabbing me that paper over there? Thanks, Ken. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks very much. Okay. All righty. Okay, we're going to obviously work on our budget hearing a little bit tonight, but before that, we have people that have signed in for Citizen Speak. Normally, we reserve that for things that are not on the agenda. However, obviously, we would like to have people speak that are here tonight, and so we're not going to stick to that rule that may have been written on some agenda that's been there forever and ever. So basically, we're going to open it up for people that want to be here to speak, I'm assuming, related to our budget situation. What I'm going to do is just go down in order. And I'm going to take residents first, and then I'll come back to the non-residents, okay? So I'm just going to go in order. We'll have about a 3-minute period each, and hopefully we'll get through in about 20 minutes, okay? Thereabouts. And so I'll let somebody be timekeeper, more or less, but try to be succinct. Come on up to the mic and introduce yourselves. And Kim Schott, you are first up. And I would ask that, if you've heard something that somebody has said and you were going to say the same thing, you might just say, okay, it's been covered and maybe I don't need to talk, but take it there. Go,
All
Kim.
set?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hi, so I'm Kim Schott. I have lived in Southampton for almost 27 years, and I'm here tonight as a concerned resident, taxpayer, and voter. We are, as a community, facing a decision about the kind of town we want Southampton to be. Do we want emergency services to reach us in time to make a life-saving difference? Do we want our older residents to have the resources they need that a properly funded Council on Aging provides? Do we want the Highway Department to have the staff and equipment to handle our winter roads? I urge the Select Board to put forward a budget at town meeting that adequately funds all town departments. I realize that such a budget requires more money than the town can raise without a 2.5 override. I will vote in favor of a 2.5 override because living in a town that provides the services that I just mentioned and more matters a lot to me. As the mother of 2 children who attended Norris and graduated from Hampshire Regional, and as a former elementary school teacher, the schools in our town are important to me too. I recently heard someone say that they can't believe that removing 5 to 9 employees from Norris is going to be as devastating as people say. I am concerned that other people in town may be thinking the same thing, so I want to address it with a couple of examples. 50-plus years ago, when I was in elementary school, there was an ad campaign with the tagline, "Reading is fundamental." That was true 50 years ago, and it's true today. Though I would update that tagline to say, reading and math are fundamental. Elementary school is where children acquire the foundational knowledge they need for future success in school and in life. Cutting over $600,000 from the Norris budget for the current school year means that 30 children are no longer receiving math support because math intervention was eliminated. If an override fails this year, another $500,000 will be cut from the Norris budget, and both reading specialist positions will be eliminated. That means that next year, more than 50 children will not receive the extra reading support they need to develop this fundamental skill. Based on these 2 examples, totaling 2.8 positions, I hope you can see that removing 5 to 9 employees would make a difference and has the potential to be devastating for a lot of children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, very good. All right. Next up, and well done on time. You must have been practicing that. Next up, Margaret Larson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Margaret, and I'm speaking as a 20-year resident of Southampton. I know many people here will speak eloquently about restorative funding for the Norris School, which I support, but I'd like to focus on the need for a single budget vote at town meeting and a single ballot override question. Over the past decade, I've been hearing a lot more "but" statements when it comes to town services. Yes, I support public safety services, but our children are more important. I understand it helps property values if we have an excellent school system, but I don't have children in the school. Sure, it's great to have a library, but our roads need to be cleared. Or at the Hampshire Regional School Committee budget meeting last night, I support education, but let's focus only on the high school and let the elementary schools figure it out. And so on. With this upcoming election, I believe it's time to flip the script and start using "and" statements. I want our kids to have a great education, and I want an appropriately funded fire department. Our senior population is important, and so are our young ones. Great schools increase property values, and our police force keeps our crime rate low. I don't think I'm naive to say all these can be true at once. When my own child was at Norris, I took great comfort in knowing she was receiving a great education and that our roads were plowed so she could get to school, and that police and fire departments were prepared in case of an emergency. If we separate the override questions by department, it creates conflict between those departments and only affirms the belief that we can look at each one in isolation, as if they don't often work hand in glove. This particularly goes for Norris and Hampshire Regional, as education should be a continuous experience that meets the needs of every student at every grade level. Separating the HRHS budget from the rest of the departments at town meeting signals a lack of support for our older students and unnecessarily alienates the other towns in our district. I'd also like to say a word about adding capital funding to the override question. Although I understand that capital monies are kept in a stabilization fund that's separate from operating expenses, I dare say the vast majority of our residents don't know this and don't particularly care. For them, it's a distinction without a difference. Our tax dollars pay for salaries, and they pay for capital improvements. Separating the capital ask from department asks ignores how intertwined the two actually are. We can't have proper highway services with equipment that's decades old. We can't safely have kids in a school with trip hazards and crumbling masonry. We can't have functioning public safety services without functioning vehicles. And conversely, what's the use of having upgraded fire equipment if we're going to decimate our firefighting staff? Having a separate override question belies the symbiotic importance of capital funding to our town services. I know we're all desperately concerned about the future of Southampton if this override doesn't pass, but we need to have confidence that we can tell the story of a fully funded town, and tell it well. The people in this room are a testament to that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks. Very good. Jen Johnson?
I will not be as eloquent as my two previous speakers. It's just not how I go. So they did say a few of the things that I wanted to say, but I just wanted to hit a couple other points. A lot of people might not know, if you don't have school-age children or grandchildren, what cuts actually did happen at Norris last year. And I know the consensus and thought process is they didn't actually happen. They figured it out, and none of that actually happened. But I just want to remind everyone that we lost a kindergarten teacher, which put the kindergartens from 4 classes to 3 classes, increasing class size at an age where class size is utterly the most important thing for them to get the quality of education they need. We lost a first grade class teacher doing the exact same thing. We lost an art teacher, and I know I've said this multiple times, but I have a 7-year-old that is outside in the hallway that was asked to do a poster. What do they call it? No, a persuasive poster. His persuasive poster, I don't know what the other kids in his class did. His was how to bring art class back, and offered up his own money. So to say that these positions that someone has quoted already, that 5 to 9 employees being not devastating from the elementary school level, is absolutely disgraceful to hear from an elected official who is in charge or somewhat in charge of the money in this town. We also lost, like my previous people said, all of the math interventionists, paraprofessionals, half of a nurse, reading specialists, administrative assistant, occupational therapist, all of these things that help support these kids to grow, to then get to the level where they can go to the high school and be successful, and then from then on, okay? So I also was at the meeting last night, and I hope that the decisions made for the Hampshire Regional, increasing their budget very minimally from what was originally proposed to, again, help save core services, is not going to directly impact the potential to push through for us to try to put Norris's budget back to restoration. We can't keep pitting one against the other. And unfortunately, we don't have the control over that budget that we have over this budget. And that's a broken system. I think that's needs fixed on another day. But I also would like to call attention to a few things that I looked up at the Mass General Law and bills that are currently in the legislature. One being making the Lowell, it's Bill H4297, which would make art a core education requirement and take a mandated percentage of Chapter 70 funds to fund arts programs in all schools, K-12 in Massachusetts. There is another bill that promotes, it's S338, legislation to promote high-quality comprehensive literary instruction in all Massachusetts schools. If we're cutting reading specialists, we are not delivering a high-quality literacy instruction to our kids. Another one, again, is for school library standards and having certain requirements that have to be met for library standards. We can't keep making cuts and then be like, well, we don't know what to do. It has to come from everywhere. And I don't think that cutting positions that are not currently people, like unfulfilled positions in the town, is the same as cutting bodies from a school. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Next up, Joanne Griffin.
Mine is not budget related. Am I still allowed to? It's your choice.
Sure, why not? You're here.
I just wanted to bring up the code red alert again. I have heard nothing why we're not getting them, and just wanted to see if that could be addressed at some point. I think it showed at the last town meeting we had, there were about 86 people there, and people I saw afterwards said, we didn't know. So it's such an important time coming up. I think it's worth looking at. I've never had an answer as to what happened to it.
Okay,
That's it. Thank you.
thank you. Janet Kane.
Good evening. I'm Janet Kane, Glendale Road. I've been a resident in town for 18 years. And full disclosure, I'm the chair of the Senior Center Building Committee, along with the vice chair of the COA board, but that's not why I'm here tonight, not tonight. My first career at a tender age of 23 was teaching. I was a member of the union, even went through a difficult strike. I appreciate and support the needs of our school district. Today, a half a century later, I am speaking not as a volunteer on any boards, but as a homeowner and taxpayer in Southampton, not as a former teacher either. I believe as a community, we should support our schools without decimating our fire, police, highway, library, senior center, and so on. We all need and depend on those departments as well. So I'm asking the select board, please don't separate the override and pit department against department. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I'd like to allocate the remainder of my time.
Okay. Next up, Francine Tishman.
Francine Tishman. I too have lived in Southampton for 18 years. I live on Glendale Road. We moved here for and over the course of those years, I served on the Finance Committee for 6 years, the Select Board for 5 years, and I continue as a member of the Bylaws Advisory Committee. For 17 of those 18 years, our property tax increases have been capped at 2.5%, with only one override. To me, this is remarkable considering my experience in other communities in which I lived. As any consumer knows, the annual cost of living and the cost of running the town has always increased above the 2.5% cap. Estimates show that over the last 10 years, the costs have gone up an average of 3.1% a year. These continual annual revenue shortfalls in our town have accumulated over the years, and periodically an adjustment is needed to keep us whole. And this is a critical year that requires an increase in revenue in order to maintain services at the current level. I am in support of all of the departments receiving the resources needed to maintain level services, from the schools, the library, fire, police, highway, accounting, and senior center, and the list goes on. As a consumer and taxpayer, I recognize that all departments are interdependent, and together they support the population of the town in totality. For that reason, I am asking that you do not split the override vote. Each and every department performs an essential function that keeps our community safe, whole, and viable. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Kelly Labrie.
Hi. I'm Kelly Labrie. Live on, do I have to say where I live? 229 Brickyard Road. I don't know. I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm here as a mom. I have three young children. 2 are in Norris currently. I'm also a nurse and a resident and taxpayer. So I am kind of bringing up also keeping the vote a single vote. So I reached out to our senior center director, Kate, and I was asking her what her budget is looking like, what the impact would be to that if the override doesn't pass. And we chatted about that and kind of are really hoping to come together with all of the different departments and figure out what it means for them and what they will lose. So my little speech will be about the Council on Aging. So, in my opinion, a strong community invests in every generation, our children in schools and our seniors at home. The fiscal year 27 budget override is critical to ensure that both our schools and our Council on Aging continue to serve our residents effectively. Our schools rely on this funding to maintain class sizes, retain teachers, support special education, and preserve academic and extracurricular programs that prepare students for the future. At the same time, the Council on Aging provides services that allow older adults to live independently and safely, including transportation, meals, wellness programs, social services, and outreach for isolated seniors. Many of these programs are lifelines. I know that there was a grant for the outreach director at the senior center, and that is something that could possibly be lost if the override doesn't pass. The need for both is growing. In Southampton, more than 1 in 5 residents are age 65 or older, while student enrollment continues to demand quality education. Both generations deserve strong community investment. In 2025, participation at the Senior Center increased by more than 20%, with 70 new members joining. 865 Wednesday lunches were distributed through the Highland Valley Elder Services. Seniors took 1,264 trips on the FRTA van, which also is in need of a driver, and that would be something that would be lost. Volunteers contributed over 3,220 hours, carrying a significant portion of the work that keeps programs running. The Triad program, which I just learned about, is a partnership with local police that helps seniors stay safe with equipment lending, sand for icy walkways, lock boxes, and reflective house numbers for first responders. We do not yet have the full picture of the financial impacts, but as Kate, the Senior Center Director, states, the impact would be critical, just as it would for our schools. Without the override, cuts would reduce the transportation, meal services, and wellness programs. At the school, the cuts would reduce teachers, class sizes, and programs vital for student success. Even small reductions for both have serious consequences. Investing in both schools and the Council on Aging is fiscally responsible and beneficial to our community as a whole. Strong schools build our community's future, while strong senior services help prevent increased hospitalizations and just poor outcomes that involve our emergency departments, police departments, and fire. In the fiscal year 27 override ensures that every generation, our children and our seniors, continue to receive the services they rely on, preserving opportunity, independence, and quality of life, which is essential for the strength of our entire community. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jessica McConnell.
Hello, I'm Jessica McConnell, 24 High Street. I am the co-chair of the Library Board of Trustees. I sent an email to the Select Board. I just want to get some clarification. As mentioned in our email, we are more than happy to make a reduction to the budget in the amount of that position, but we need to maintain our children's librarian. They are our assistant director. They need to be highly qualified. Our last 3 directors Andrea LeClaire is currently our intern. Johanna Douglas, Barbara Golden were all originally children's librarians at Edwards Public Library. They all have master's degrees. That position needs to be maintained. Without that position, if the director is not there, we have nobody that's fully in charge of the library. Andrea, when she was in the children's librarian position over the last 3 years, has received grants totaling $20,500. So that position doesn't just check out books to children and read stories. They fill an essential part of our library. Our director does not have time to do that kind of work. Our budget, as it's funded by the town, covers our personnel, our building, maintenance, and utilities. All of our programs and half of our books, or more than half of our books, our funding for our books, some of it comes from the town and the rest is also through donation as well, correct?
We get the full materials, the
minimum
we need from
the town.
State certification from
Correct.
the town.
So we get a large portion of our budget through donation. All we're asking is we need to maintain that children's library, and without it we just can't function. And if the override fails, we're going to lose that anyway, but we should be able to maintain that without the override, especially if things go wrong at Norris. Last time the budget was cut at Norris, our library went to Norris Elementary on a weekly basis and helped fill that position that had gotten cut at Norris. We cannot help Norris if we don't have the staff ourselves. So we're serving more than one position in the community. We also need to maintain a certain number of hours, which we can't do without staffing. So can you clarify who has control over our budget as far as where the cuts are made? Is that you deciding to cut a position, or do we get to cut money from our budget and maintain that
I
position?
think we're not going to have question and answer tonight, okay?
It'll
come up during our discussions, I'm sure.
Anything I missed? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ashley Stone.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Stone. My family and I moved to Southampton in 2019. Southampton is where I purchased my first home, had my first child, and I even married my sweet husband right in our backyard in the middle of the pandemic. Southampton is our home, and although it is not perfect, I often find myself pleasantly surprised by the benefits of small town life. The very first night we moved into our home, it hadn't been occupied for several months beforehand, and my husband got up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, but because we had just moved in, we didn't have blinds, so he used his cell phone flashlight to navigate through the home. Before he even made it back to our bedroom, Southampton PD was at our door because concerned neighbors noticed a suspicious flashlight moving through our house, and the PD decided that was a worthwhile concern and showed up to check on it. Some people might not think that adds a lot of value, but as someone who grew up in a city where neighbors don't always call when an emergency is taking place right outside, and where the police don't respond unless there's something really severe like gunshots, knowing that our neighbors are looking out and the police are highly responsive to resident concerns gave us an immense sense of safety. Not passing the 2.5 override could result in cuts to our police department, which have the potential to significantly reduce our community safety. When our daughter entered the public school system, which we were very grateful to be able to take advantage of Norris's preschool program, our friends from larger cities teased that we would be burdened with an immense amount of snow days, because living in such a small town, given the difficulties that underlie serving community that is more rural and includes a mix of paved and gravel roads, that means more snow days. Although we're not obviously immune to that, I have not experienced an excessive amount of 2-hour delays or snow days in comparison to friends that are living in nearby towns. And as a West Coast transplant who drives an older model Honda Civic, I am always grateful that the roads are so well treated, because I cannot navigate them without that. Our highway department accomplishes all of that with a fleet of 18 trucks and heavy equipment, of which 11 are older than the 12-year useful lifespan of equipment, and with a department that has contracted over time, not expanded in line with our population. Without an override, the highway department may not have funding necessary to support some of their key functions, never mind the more proactive projects like landscaping town hall and maintaining the athletic fields and playgrounds. As the mom of a child at Norris, I could speak for hours about my concerns around the impacts of the school if we don't pass an override. The loss of so many positions would be catastrophic and felt at every level of the school, including the children. Just reading through the list of positions and services on the chopping block makes me feel sick and ashamed, but not nearly as sick and anxious as I feel or would feel if this vote gets separated out. I'm here to urge you to push forward the override as a single question vote. There are so many of our town's core services that will inevitably be impacted without an override, and we should not be forced to pit one service against another. It's time to plan for Southampton's future and take steps to make the systemic changes needed at state and federal levels to better fund rural towns like ours, but we cannot do it as a fractured town that has been taken out by infighting and finger pointing. This is our time to come together. Please do not force us apart. Thank you.
Tammy Walunas.
Tammy Walunas, 298 College Highway. Been living here for 35 years, and the CPA has always been an active part of our community, Community Preservation Act. And I know at one time at an annual town meeting, there was a proposal of getting rid of it completely. I'm not proposing that. I would like to know, is it possible for this year to take those funds that would normally go into the 3 different categories for CPC and take that money and apply it to our budget? It's a lot of money. Is it something that we can do a partition and put it onto the as an article on the annual town meeting? If so, what do we need to do? But we have funds that we're already taking from families that could really be used towards our schools and our other departments. It's a lot there. And I would think that for 1 year, we might be able to do that.
Thank you. All right. Jeff Boder.
I think I'm going to yield my time because I was not going to talk about budget.
Okay, thank you very much. Robert Floyd.
I signed that sheet, Madam Chair, eagerly thinking it was an attendance sheet, so.
Okay, we have 2 non-residents who signed up. I'm going to allow them to speak. Lauren Ames.
Hello. Good evening. I'm Lauren Ames. I'm co-president of the Southampton Teachers Association and a Norris educator. I've taught kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade over the last 16 years. I'm going to read a letter tonight. Dear Southampton Select Board and community members, we are writing to you as members of the Southampton Teachers Association, but more importantly, as the educators who work with your children every day. We care deeply about our students, our school, and the future of our town. At this critical moment, we want to share openly and honestly about the urgent need to fully fund our school. Last year, Norris School faced significant budget cuts that have already had a direct and lasting impact on students and staff. These reductions were not simply numbers on a budget sheet. They drastically changed the daily experience of children in our classrooms. Due to last year's cuts, 1 kindergarten classroom was eliminated. 1 1st grade classroom was eliminated. The art teacher position was eliminated. Math intervention was eliminated. 2 paraprofessional positions were eliminated. 1 school nurse was reduced to half-time. 1 administrative assistant was reduced to half-time. Reading interventionist hours were reduced. Occupational therapy and speech and language were reduced. There is currently no teacher supply budget money. Even with these significant reductions, teachers and staff have worked tirelessly to maintain the high-quality education that Southampton families expect and deserve. However, the system is already stretched to its limits. On Monday, March 9th, the staff at Norris were made aware that the school district was facing an additional $500,000 in cuts simply to meet a level service budget. If an override does not pass, this would mean more devastating cuts next year. The assistant principal will be eliminated. All reading intervention will be eliminated. 2 more paraprofessionals will be eliminated. The existing half-time nurse will be eliminated. The existing half-time administrative assistant will be eliminated. 1 custodian will be reduced. Paraprofessional support in preschool will be drastically reduced. Occupational therapy will be further reduced. Speech and language services will be further reduced. We will continue to have no budget for classroom supplies. These reductions will negatively impact all students. Southampton is a community that should value education. Our school plays a vital role in the strength and vibrancy of our town. As educators, we see every day how important manageable class sizes are, student support services, and adequate resources for learning. When these resources are reduced, students feel the effects. We share this information to ensure that our community understands the real impact school funding decisions have inside of our classrooms. This override is essential for maintaining the quality of education that our students deserve. We are proud to teach in Southampton and grateful to be part of a community that cares about its children. Thank you for taking the time to listen and support the students of Southampton. Sincerely, the Southampton Teachers Association.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Andrea.
I thought it was an attendance sheet too.
Andrea.
So, is that the end of the list? I do know that a citizen came in after you collected the sheet who's a resident who would like to speak.
Okay.
So if there's anybody else.
Yeah, come on up, sorry. What's your name, sorry?
Austin Rogers. Good evening, Austin Rogers, 7 Old Harvest Road. I'm a resident in town. I have previously served on the local school committee board, and I haven't made it a habit in my life to be popular or to do what everyone else is doing, and tonight will be no different, because I do support splitting the override question. Not because I personally think that's a good idea. I'm probably going to vote for all the items, no matter what, because I agree with everyone in this room that all of the services are important. All of the services deserve to be fully funded. But I think that there's a pessimism in our town and towns across America that governments are mismanaging money. I don't think that that's well-founded, especially in our town. I've sat through meetings and looked at meetings online where, you know, you go through the budget and there's no fat to trim anymore. We're just cutting people now. So I don't agree with that pessimism. I think it's wrong, but it's there. And so when we say, you know, splitting the override into multiple questions is pitting the departments against each other, we're engaging in the same pessimism as some of those people that don't understand the budget situation. And I think that it's wrong to ask for trust and not give trust. So when we're not splitting the question, we're not trusting the citizens of this town to make the choice that's going to serve all of the departments and have that cohesion. And, you know, to say that it's all or nothing is like if a boat were sinking and we say either everyone gets off the boat or everyone drowns. And I don't think that's a good idea. I think if we only have the choice to save something, you save the kids first. And so if there's a way to split off the regional and the local budget from the rest in the override question, I think that is putting trust out to the citizens, and it's saying, we trust you to make the right decision. If everyone in this room has the same vote as the rest of our citizens, then we'll have no issue. But I think we need to be realistic and acknowledge that there are hundreds of people that have voted against overrides in the past that are all in, and we risk that happening again. And I don't think that we should run that scenario again at the expense of the children, considering what's at stake. And that's unfortunate, but I think we've done it enough times that we know what's going to happen if we do that. And you know, I don't want to pit all of the departments against the schools either. I think having an all-in, all or nothing, black and white question is going to do that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Good. Thank you, everyone. I think we're at the end. Okay. You certainly can. Yes, thank you. We need to get on to the actual business, so we've gone over a little bit longer than I had planned on the open time for the public. So we'd like to continue with our basic business. We'll get a few items on the agenda
Madam
first.
Chair?
Yes, sir.
Could we-
Oh, yes, you have a quorum. FinCom, please call yourselves to order. I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
Call to order at 6:37.
Very good, thank you. So we're going to just go down through the agenda. We'll be getting down to the budget question, which I'm sure many of you will be hanging around for here, but let's go through some of the basics. We have one resignation on the docket.
Motion to accept the resignation from the Culture Council effective March 12th, 2026.
Okay. A second, all right. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, motion accepted. Thank you. Town Administrator, do we have any other reports that you'd like to share?
I'll probably wait till budget and health insurance.
Okay, all right. Select Board, any other minutes from notes you have from meetings you have attended?
I
Ellen?
met with Concom, the Conservation Commission last night, attended that, and the the Pleasant Street project, the Blue Wave battery energy, the solar project was put off until their next meeting, which will be April 6th.
So that hearing is continued?
It's continued to April
Okay.
6th.
All right, anything else? Stephen, anything?
Too much, probably. Which one do you want me to share? No, I think the topic tonight is the budget, so let's move along.
All right. John, anything?
Just they're both budget related. Since our last meeting, Norris School Committee has passed their budget, and Hampshire Regional finalized their budget last night, which was a slight increase of $110,000, or roughly $60,000 to Southampton.
Okay, thank you. All right. From my end, main work is on a grant proposal that we're working on for the Echo One Stop program, and this is related actually to Norris and the Senior Center. There have been some surveys out to look at how heat issues affect elders as well as kids and athletes in particular. So working with Norris and SYA and Senior Center, we've been looking at ways to think about improving certain facilities at Norris, which would be looking at possibility of doing some HVAC improvements in at least the cafetorium, perhaps. There's been a feasibility study done on that, and now it would be to take it to a next level. It wouldn't be any installation, no construction yet. It's everything in these grant things is very, very slow in that regard, but it would be trying to get it from the feasibility study to a more engineering look at what would be necessary if we could do something like that. And then secondly would be to improve what's called kind of a heat island, which is on the outside of Norris, out on the back play areas, and especially around the back side of the school where you're all waiting to pick up kids on a hot summer day, hot spring day, whatever. So we're looking at possible ways to alleviate some of that. So there's a grant possibility for that. So we've been working on that as the grant committee, working with both the COA and the school and the SYA, and we'll be putting in an application if the portal allows us to get into it, hopefully by Friday. The deadline is Friday, and it's just, it takes months to figure out if you ever get a grant, but just to know that's what we're working on. So, okay. New business. We have one thing, and maybe, Stephen, you might have a better clue on this than any of us do. I don't know, as a water commissioner, we have a letter from the water commissioners that I believe we must need to sign something?
You can skip that one. Yeah, you can take that off the agenda.
Oh, it's off?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. They didn't do that, okay.
We'd be happy to talk about it with you, but it's an evolving situation.
Oh, okay, all right. I thought that was ready for a bid opening. Okay.
No, it's a FYI.
Oh, okay, yep. All right, so forget that one. And then next thing up, though, Scott, I believe we need to open the warrant for the town meeting. So the annual town meeting is May 2nd?
2nd, yep.
And we need to open the warrant. So I'll take a motion to open the warrant. Anybody?
I move to open the warrant for
Stephen,
annual
okay.
town meeting 2026 to be
All right.
held May 2nd.
All right.
And to instruct the constables to go forth and herald the voters.
We'll open the warrant, and we have a second? Yes, all right, second, all right. Do you have a deadline, Scott, when you want to close that warrant? Do we give an idea of the timing on that?
Is this the same as call for articles?
Yeah, this is basically calling for articles, so
Yeah, I would like to get everything done by April 1st.
April 1st.
Yeah, I've already publicized that to all the boards and commissions.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion on the floor to open the warrant as of today? All right. all
So
those
the
in favor?
call for articles would be the point where the citizens could put in an article to reduce the CPA surcharge from 3 to 1.
They could put
if
in a
they so
citizen,
choose.
that
This
would be a
the time to
citizen's
do it.
petition if they wanted to do that. So the call for articles will be open from now over the next couple of weeks until April 1st. Okay? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. It is so declared. Okay. Let us get into the FY '27 budget, and Scott, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you to drive us through this in terms of the figures that I know you've been working on with the various departments and see where things are landing at the moment. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this would be looking at an override budget first, is that right?
So similarly with the last meeting, I went over my proposed budget. I guess the biggest question is, how much is the override going to be? If you fully restore Norris's budget at the $750,000 plus, including the cuts that I've already made to the budget that I proposed, the override would have to be $2,162,000. At the 8%, and this also includes the additional $60,000 from Hampshire Regional, the override would have to be $1,786,000. Now, we had a lot of discussions over the last couple of weeks during the budget task force on, what is a number that both meets our needs, but also would be able to pass at the ballot box. And no one has a crystal ball on that. You don't want to end up like Hadley, where they proposed a $2.5 million plus budget, and now they're ongoing. Even now, they're looking for a $1.5 million budget after all of their cuts. We thought on the budget task force that we wanted to keep it around the $1.8 million budget. We definitely didn't want to go over $2 million. But when you look at the actual numbers, looking at adding to the 1.7, might be reasonable, because it does get us a lot of value for the money. We could restore a little bit more to Norris over the 8% that was proposed. It wouldn't be a full restorative budget. We could do a few things that the town has already cut, like the library children's librarian. That's a little bit. So I guess the question to the select board is, what is a override number that would accomplish what we need to, but also has the potential of being approved by the voters?
Okay. And what is the 376 figure there, sorry?
I'm sorry, that's that's my number for the fully restorative Norris budget over what I proposed. So I added that in, so we'd now be in a deficit of 376, so we'd have to adjust the override number.
Oh, because you'd already prepared the budget, the override budget and override budget at 1.7,
Yep.
correct?
So the right here is the override number. So we would have to increase that to the 2.16.
Okay, got
Are
it.
we going to take this in chunks, or are we going to listen to
I don't know,
all
how would you
proposals?
like to proceed, folks?
Well, I have a
yeah?
lot of questions.
Yeah, okay, and I know FinCom you probably do too, so how would you like, Stephen, you got a question first?
Well, at the last meeting, I asked for Scott to go back and show one of his slides, and we didn't actually get there. But I thought it was really important to set the context that we're not only in crisis this year, but we can foresee that we will remain in crisis in out years. And I know that if after 20 years of failure, we win an override, the voters will expect us to wait another 20 years. And so if we look at the growth in the school budgets and the 2.5% levy limit, you see that we can only afford schools in about 3 years. And all of municipal government goes away. Library, seniors. I don't know how that looks, but that graph was compelling to me. And it suggests that in 2 or 3 years, almost regardless of the magnitude of the override, we will have to do it again because 2.5% growth does not cover. Think about your utility bill. Think about your health insurance bill. Think about filling up the car with gasoline. It's an evolving world, and it's not getting cheaper. So that, thank you, that's the graph exactly. So I exaggerated a little bit, but you can see that we can afford only schools by fiscal year 32. And the structural deficit has wiped out. I mean, it's kind of apples and oranges because, of course, we have to have municipal government. But the trend is clear.
Okay, thank you. Anyone? John, you have a suggestion?
Yeah, so I guess part of my concern or issue is those numbers on the screen don't reflect anything that's in front of us right now. So this is part of my concern because I can see right there the police department is 1.413. What's in front of me is 1.333943. And so the 1.413 is exactly what the department had asked for. And if you scroll up a little bit, see that what you have in front of us here, you gave us a Norris number that you're proposing $5,859,000, which is exactly this year's number.
No, that's on the reduced budget. That would be level funding under reduced.
Well, actually, it was
an 8% increase that I proposed for Norris.
TA proposed, right? They're identical. I go to Norris, $5,859,582. That's this year's budget.
The budget I proposed was an 8% increase.
Scott, is the one that says fiscal year 27 TA proposed with HRHS update? That's your proposal?
It might be an error, but the one that I sent out and the one I went over at last meeting was a 8% increase at just under $500,000 for Norris.
So I'd like a hard copy of whatever the latest version is, and then no more Excel sheets out there. But so that leads me to my other question is if the local school committee, who is elected in their own right and is the sole body charged with putting forward a budget number to the select board to be considered to be placed on the ballot, if they voted $6,705,437, why didn't that number get to the select board? Why would, and you don't have to answer it.
The number did get to the select board, and the proposed budget from Norris did reach the select board. This is my proposed budget to the select board, and the select board is the ultimate authority on whether or not to fund on the schools.
So that gets me back to, I'd like to see a budget that has all the asks from the department heads, which is going to be much higher than this 1.7 or 1.8 million. That's our starting point. What is that number?
It was, I sent it out several weeks ago, it was a $2.2 million budget.
It was about 2.2 or 2.4, was it not?
And that included all the asks from the department heads.
Can you possibly bring that up?
No, that's the one that's posted on the website. So that's the real number, 2.4. But it's not, because that doesn't have the correct Norris number.
That was the ask
That
at
was
that
the
time.
Norris.
That had the 8% increase for Norris at that time. That was
With respect, that was not the ask from the Norris School Committee. That was a placeholder that this board instructed the town administrator to put in there. So we still don't have one document that has the voted on Norris number, the voted on Hampshire regional number, which is going to increase that 2.4, and I understand that.
I believe we had from Norris a budget that came in right around the figure that Scott had put in as a placeholder. If I'm not mistaken, from our original meeting, this had been the figure, the 8% had been in there, and Norris came in just a little bit less at their hearing the other night, and it was, my understanding of it, it was requested to not let that 100,000 or 50,000 or whatever it was sit on the table, but to fill it up to what the town administrator had proposed. That, I think, was there. And then there was the subsequent vote to do a fully restorative budget, is my understanding. I could be wrong. I'm willing to hear from Somebody from the school committee who's out there?
I'd like to see the current budget with.
Sure, Kim, come on up, please. And I think Norris tried very hard to stay within the parameters that they were given for budgeting.
Hi. So for those of you who don't know, I'm also the chair of the local school committee. So the town did not see a budget request from the Norris School Committee until after the public hearing, which took place on Wednesday, March 11th. Prior to that, the placeholder that was there was a hypothetical that the school committee had not weighed in on. At the public hearing, there was discussion about maybe just doing a little bit more. Ultimately, though, the school committee voted to ask for a restorative budget. So the single budget request that came from the Norris School Committee was for a town contribution of $6,705,437, which would be an increase of $845,855 over the fiscal 26 budget. So there's never been more than one version of the budget presented to the town. There was a single vote, one vote, and that was the vote. I hope that clears it up.
So now, I sit on both boards, and I said at that meeting, I made the motion. I supported the 845, knowing that when it got to the select board, it probably wasn't going to survive at 845. But I believe that's where we should be starting. Again, Norris is a department. Hampshire Regional is a regional school. They are separate and distinct. So every other department got their initial request in, and they got that into the budget. Some tweaking has happened, yes. But my point is, before we just go down this road of where we're going to cut or what our override's number is going to be there, I'm a numbers person. I want to see the starting point that has all the original requests in there, which includes the final votes for Hampshire Regional and the final vote for Norris. What is that? That's our starting point of how high we are. That's probably unsustainable. Then we back out the recommendations from the town administrator in conjunction with his task force, and we start weighing those as a body of these two bodies who ultimately are the group charged with putting forward the budget, which will lead us to the override. We're going to have two versions, maybe three versions of what it's going to be. That's a further discussion. And while I have the floor, I just want to point out that I'm not in favor of dividing the override question for departments. I do believe Hampshire Regional needs to stand on its own. It is a regional school, and under the law, the town legislative body only has one choice. Vote it up, vote it down. That's it. We can't amend it. Town department budgets can be amended on the floor with 2 copies to the town moderator ahead of time. It should be its own question. Up, down, or take no action. Take no action means it failed. It has to pass. 2 communities fail or take no action, it has to go back to Hampshire Regional School Committee, and they have 10 days to act. It does mean we're going to have a special meeting to get it forward, but there's a whole separate set of laws that follow that. And there's a fail-safe that if we fail to meet it, because there's 5 communities will have to meet again, there's a 1/12 budget, the Commissioner of Education comes right in and sets it. We don't have to worry about that. We need to worry about the town. I do believe the override question should be one for the town operational. If we decide to put money forward for a capital, I would argue this probably isn't the year to do it. But if we were, I would argue that that should be its own line item. There should be an operational override. If we're going to have a capital override, there's that. Hampshire Regional should stand on its own, as the law says, and it's the only right we've got. Traditionally, it's always been mixed in with our budget, which caused some chaos last year.
I think the idea would be to also, thank you, John, to try to make this as clear and as simple as possible for the voters. I think once we start doing piecemeal here and there, it becomes very confusing, as it was last year. So I think that's a question to be debated still. I don't think that's on tonight to decide whether it's pulling out Hampshire or pulling out capital from this budget. I think we still need to talk about the general overall budget and where we are with this. And I don't know, from the task force people or anybody else that would like to say something, or Reggie, FinCom?
I just really want to support what John said. I think that's the only mechanism to look at the high school budget separately. From what I understand, we have to vote as a town on whether to approve it or not. And if we don't separate it out, there's no vote. So I just think procedurally, John's absolutely correct, that we have to do that. We probably should have been doing that every year.
Well, and we are the first town to go for town meeting, to my knowledge, right?
We are this year.
And we would be also taking a gamble that some other town would do the same.
However, our cousins to the west of us in Easthampton have scheduled a special town meeting just to approve the override. So we'll know prior to our town meeting whether their override passes. If their override doesn't pass, they can't sustain the budget, and that'll be a no vote.
But they still have to bring it to town meeting.
Oh, yeah, and they will after ours.
Yeah.
But the point is, again, we convolute and we mix everything together to make life easy for us, but the fact is, we have a dual school system. The town is responsible for pre-K through 6, and it is a department of the town. 7th grade through 12th grade, we waive our responsibility, and we say, we want to regionalize. And we send them up to Hampshire Regional, and they're separate. And because it's regional, we either vote, and whatever number comes down, we can't amend it. We have to support it, vote it down, or the more popular option is pass and set a future meeting, which is the same as voting it down without actually having to vote it down. And then there's mechanism, Hampshire Regional School Committee will get, if a second committee does it, community does it, they'll have 10 days to get back together and put forward something else. And if this is also, the law was also written, we're supposed to have our meetings in March. Over time, society has moved to May. So the window's closed, or is short.
Okay, all right. Would anybody like to suggest how we'd like to cover this? I was assuming that we might kind of go through the bigger categories tonight, just to see what that looked like. And we've gone through it at the budget hearings. We've had some discussions at the budget task force. But just for the interest of the public, just to look at and see what we're looking at for the various departments, if that makes any sense.
Well, what are we looking at? The proposed budget, the real budget, or the cut budget?
This would be part of the cut budget, is it not?
Do you want me to do the cuts, or do you want to do my proposed?
No, not the cut budget, but this is what you've gotten to an override budget. So it's cut from the original asks of most departments, is it not?
Right, and I can show you the spreadsheet here for what to get to the 1.8 or the 1.7. This is what I cut from the town side.
Okay. You want to kind of go through that then?
The land use planner was cut. Permit link reduced by 4,000. We'll put those fees onto the user fees, so that'll be self-sustaining.
And that's for the online permitting, just for anybody, mostly for building and fire permits, I believe, as well?
Yep. I cut $10,000 from the run-out costs from transitioning from Hampshire County Group Insurance Trust, $47.50 from the tree maintenance, the COA, cut half of the volunteer coordinator, $2,500 from the reserve, the vacant full-time firefighter at $57,366, the health consultant by $10,000, the youth librarian by $20,783, the library technician by $9,375, and then adding into the agent, if we are going to cut the land use planner, it would be restorative of the conservation agent.
So that got you to $188,000 worth of cuts. Okay.
Madam Chair, I just have a question. I don't know how this works, but so say we have an override, we put the budget in that includes the override, and it fails. Is there a separate budget that's shown to the townspeople to know? So they look at with the override and without.
Right.
There'll be two budgets, column A, column B, fire department with cuts, fire department without, school department with, school department without, and all the way down.
Yeah. So essentially, there'd be a budget that shows an override, whatever that amount is, the 1718, whatever, and then another budget that shows without the override passing. So it's sort of the catastrophic budget, if you will.
How many override budgets how many budgets can there be? Just 2, or could there be 3?
There could be an infinite.
Right. So that gets me back to, thank you for agreeing with me so quickly. That gets me back to,
like South Hadley's doing
where
several.
are we? What's our number? If it's a 2.4, adding the 60 in from Hampshire Regional, adding the 100 or 200,000 from Norris, and that's realistically 2.6, call it 2.7. All right, that's what the department heads across the board are saying we need to run our department, because There were no asks in there. The only asks that were in there were previously approved but not filled, i.e. the land use planner. We cannot go year after year asking for overrides. If we kind of, well, we can kind of get away with this, we really don't need $4,800 for trees. You asked our tree warden, the 8,000 he has now is not enough, and we're going to cut 4,800. So do I think it's going to pass? Probably not. But what is the number to reset the system? Because Proposition 2.5 was never meant to be permanent. So that's like column C. That's, hey, this is what we need to fix the ship. And we're not going to ask, we better not ask for an override for another 2 or 3 years. Now it's like, well, that's probably a big ask. This is what we think we can do, but here's the cuts that go with that. So that's option B. And then if we don't get an override at all, here's where we're coming in at option C. And let the voters decide at the ballot box which one they want to support. And I'll argue again that Hampshire Regional needs to be pulled out of that. And if we want to fund, I'm in favor of funding capital improvements. I just don't think this year is the year to start that campaign. But if we're going to, I think it needs to be its own question. Because I think some folks are more apt to support an operational override, and we'll deal with the capital in a year or two, which is kicking the can down the road, which we've done for 47 years.
It's part of our problem.
Yeah.
Is that we don't have enough capital to be able to do the large purchases we need in town for some of our major equipment.
I'd be curious to
agree.
see what FICON thinks about that.
I've also agreed with setting the capital spending plan aside as its own override. So this may be a little bit of a contrived example, but when you can't afford to pay your mortgage, you cut back on your 401k. It would be great if we weren't in a structural deficit and we could each year put towards, building up a capital balance, a balance of funds to apply to some of the bigger projects we have coming down eventually. But right now we can't meet our operational needs under Prop 2.5, and it just seems like we are taking resources that we desperately need to fund needed core services. Most of the budget, 99% of the budget is core services. We're not a big city with a lot of fluff and redundant services, and most of these core services do not have replacements. So the library, for example, if we are decertified, yes, our residents can go to other town libraries, but they cannot check out books. Cannot check out books is my point. That's not replaceable. The school, right? All the school services that we, desperately need to provide to our students at Norris, there's no great alternative for parents to replace that drastic cut in services. And beyond that, you start asking parents to, basically fill that gap themselves. Some of our residents won't be able to afford the tutors and the additional things. So you start making, opportunities in the town, divided by socioeconomic class. And I just think that, the capital spending plan is really something we should have done many years ago. But right now, if the structural deficit, it's just not that time. Just like I weighed in on the new senior center. It is wonderful, the plan that was put forward, but it's not fiscally responsible with the structural deficit. And I would say that the capital plan is right in that same bucket.
Anyone else at work? Steve?
I also appreciate the perspective that Scott's brought to it, that we have apparently only ever in recent history made capital investments as a Prop 2.5 exclusion. And that doesn't recognize the fact that we have every year capital expenses or depreciation, or we have to keep up with it. And it's only prudent to have an amount in our annual budget, even if that increases the amount of the annual budget override, as a budgeting thing. I totally support looking at the capital needs. As a strategic matter at town, for the town ballot, I could go along with carving out capital. You make a compelling argument, all new information to me, for separating out the regional school while we embrace Norris as the town department. It's going to be an astronomical ask for the town. It just is. And I think that $4,500 for trees doesn't touch the fundamental issues.
I also think it does a disservice if we don't say this is the real number we need. And you know, do I think it's going to pass? No, but I think we need to let the public weigh in on it and then set a middle number that we're like, okay, if we can't go that far, this is what we really think. This is what we need to run the way we're running now and to correct the things that we need to correct as we go on. And this isn't touching, you know, Zero College Highway or any of those other projects. This is just to maintain the core we have. We know we need a land use planner so that we can work to develop the parcels within town, to get them out there on the street and to add revenue. So, I mean, that is an asset that's in there. That was in last year's budget. It just never got cut when the state came in and said, oh, you over budgeted by $175,000, you got to cut things. So instead of laying people off, we made the conscious decision not to kick that can another year, right? So I really believe there should be 3 numbers put before the voters. Here's what we need to go in. We understand this is a big ask. If we can get is it 2/3 at the ballot or 50% at the ballot?
2/3, I think.
Whichever way is, if we can get enough to vote, then fine, it's done. If not, then we go to the middle one. But let the citizens vote in on each one option that they want, you know, and let the body be heard. But give them all the options.
It's just majority, right?
So are you saying that then the potential would be the 2.4 that we started with as the ask?
Plus the 2 adjustments.
As one number?
Plus the 2 adjustments.
Yes. And then the 1.7-ish or whatever that has been proposed through the task force as one, and then the non-override.
Correct.
Interesting.
And I would probably, I would then go on to argue maybe altering the proposed cuts a little bit, but not necessarily the bottom line.
I don't know, tough choices. I know I was following a little bit what other towns are doing, and South Hadley is putting forth at least 3, I think. Maybe they've narrowed it down to 2 now, but they were choosing multiple figures for an override, and that was, I think, somewhat confusing in its own right too, because they were very close together in terms of those numbers.
Well,
you know, like a 9 million or an 11 million override.
It also becomes a big education piece, right? The sooner we can lock in on these numbers, the sooner we can start the education process.
No, absolutely. No, there's got to be a major campaign, and I do appreciate everybody coming tonight and talking about your thoughts about the override and how to present that, because I think there has to be an all-of-town campaign if we're going to go for this, for sure. I think part of my concern, just in terms of, I mean, hearing you on the pulling out Hampshire Regional, but there's something that, and I'm not one of those parents, so I can't say, but I mean, it feels like you've got parents at Hampshire Regional, they're obviously town residents. So they're town residents, their kids came up through Norris for the most part. Now they're a parent, they just happen to be, you know, their kiddos now at Hampshire Regional, so why would they want to come and support an override if Hampshire Regional is not part of the whole package? I mean, we need the Hampshire Regional parents to vote as well for an override, not just...
This is the distinction. I don't know what the Hampshire Regional number is off the top of my head. We'll just call it 7 million, 7.6. Am I in the ballpark?
On the Hampshire Regional number?
6.28,
All right.
I believe.
So 6.28 million. That 6.28 million is 6.28 million with the override, without the override. It's 6.28 million. So if we leave it in there and make it part of the whole number, that 6.2 never changes. Meaning, if the override fails, we can't reduce that $6.2 million to Hampshire Regional. We have to absorb those cuts in every other bucket in there. And the natural one will be to go to Norris strictly by the law of large numbers, right? That's where the focus is going to go. So I do think it's an educational piece. The Hampshire Regional budget cannot be altered It has to be that number. You either support it or you don't support it, or you pass on that question. And that's the same as not supporting it. Because the law says we got to put it before the body. The law does not say the body has to take action on it. And the select board is powerless to change it because we're not the legislative body when it comes to that item. The citizens are, because we're a town. So that's the reason for me why it needs to be its own number. Because if we leave it in the override and the override passes, great, no problem.
Right.
If we leave it there and the override fails, that number does not get adjusted.
But if the override fails and no other town defeats it, then we're still stuck with that number.
That's right.
Yeah. We're stuck with that number no matter what. That's why you get up and you send a message that you pass on it, because we're the first one, knowing that at least 2 other communities are relying on overrides in order to pass their budgets. It's part of the regional system. 1966, we made the conscious decision to go down this road.
Madam Chair, follow-up question.
Yes.
You didn't really make a distinction between what gets evaluated at town meeting versus at the ballot. Do you know how that would work? So at town meeting, we're going to say we have a separate vote for Hampshire Regional, and it passes or fails. It passes. Then does that individual piece go to the ballot?
No, if it passes, that's their number. So basically, that the Hampshire regional number would come out of our town budget.
So it's not part of an override?
No. Because we couldn't give more money if we wanted to. We can only act on that number.
That's the maximum that they voted, yeah. Override, though, at town meeting, if it passes town meeting, it still has to go.
Has to go to the budget. That's the only thing that really goes is the override goes to the paper ballot.
I don't see, this again, I don't believe that the Hampshire regional number should be in the town budget. It's not an operational cost. Although our liability for retirement is sitting in there, we can't adjust that number even if we wanted to, right? So that is a fixed number. No matter what happens, we need to come up with $6,281,000. And the only way not to come up with that is for us to take no action on the question, vote the question down, and hope that one of the other 4 communities does the same thing. And then that doesn't even guarantee that when it goes back to the Hampshire Regional School Committee that they're going to do anything. They could push that number back forward to us and not make any adjustment. We don't know. That's a parallel path that we have to go down. So I would propose that the $6,281,651 be removed from the town budget. It be its own article, and knowing that we need to make that part of our number, but that's almost our starting point, and then everything else above that is the town budget. How that gets illustrated, how that gets communicated, we can go down that road if I'm in the majority, but I don't know that I've convinced 2 of my colleagues yet.
Scott, thoughts?
I just think it has to be simple. I mean, we have to pick an override number. It should cover Hampshire Regional, it should cover Norris, it should cover town operational costs. If we start going down this road of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 choices, it's going to confuse people. It's going to be difficult. It's just that we need to get a budget in shape. With the 1.8 million, it covers everything. It covers the $60,000 increase that Hampshire Regional has had. We can add more into the Norris budget. We can restore some cuts and still keep it into a reasonable amount. But the bottom line is we still need to get a number that the voters are going to approve.
And I'm still proposing that. I'm saying pull Hampshire Regional out, make it its own standalone question as the law says we should do, then give the voters 3 options. The budget that all the department heads want, the budget that we think, magically looking at the crystal ball, the voters will support, and then a failed override.
I mean,
Those are your 3 numbers.
In Hadley, they gave 2 options and both of them failed.
Well, and if it does, it does. We don't know until it gets to the ballot box, but there's 6,200 of us in this community. Let's put it before the voters. Let's give them their options.
What happened last year? Did we not pull out Hampshire 3 or 4 years ago from the budget at town meeting?
I think it was 2 years ago, we had to do a special vote to authorize operational funds to be spent on it in the event that the override failed. It was that $475,000 that we ended up having to repay.
Something like that.
2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. So, I mean, came back to bite us no matter what. I mean, yeah. Thanks.
Just maybe saying the obvious, if we are all in for an override, we fund Hampshire Regional at their ask. But if the overrides fail, what's the number for Hampshire Regional?
6,281,651.
I think it's a no. Which argues for the strategy that requires calling it out separately.
So if that were out of the budget by itself, that gets us down to what's the bottom line on our budget, Scott, that we'd be putting forth? Instead of the total amount of the budget would be, what would we be asking for the override?
It would still be 1.7 because I level
Yeah.
funded the Hampshire Regional.
You're just going to get to it in two buckets.
Okay.
Yeah, the catastrophe we haven't even begun to look at.
Right, because again, going with the number, the proposed number eliminates a position at the library. And I'm only bringing that up because it was brought up here tonight. So, okay, so if that moves forward, I'm not saying I'm in favor or against it, but if that moves forward, are we never going to fund that again? Because you're not going to make that up in 2.5% overrides. I mean, I'm sorry, within the 2.5% limits as time goes on. So, again, I go back to the voters should be given the opportunity to vote on the proper budget. And if they pass it, and we're done, and we've reset the clock, and hopefully we can go another 10 years without having to go back 2.5, right? But if we pass the middle number, under what I'm proposing, right, the middle number, and that's the only option we give the voters, in a year from now, when we say, well, we'd like to put the assistant librarian, whatever that title job is, over there, but we need an override to do it. Well, you just got one last year. So this is what we need to reset the clock. And hopefully we can get enough to vote for it, and then we're done. But if we can't, we give them a middle road to take.
But we're still only done for a couple of years. I mean, we're never going to be.
I agree.
I mean, 2.5% is never going to help us keep our budget solvent, no matter what. And there's no changes happening at the legislature that we're aware of.
No, I mean, honestly, the health insurance really
Yeah, health insurance bill.
caused all this.
Yeah, a large part of it. Yeah, I'm hoping by pulling out of that system that we, at least on this side, have, decided to be a little bit more prudent in terms of that health insurance cost. But, we've got to see how that plays out. But it looks like it will be advantageous to us at this point. But it's still not going to help us not have an override 2 years from now. I mean, I fully see that even if we do an override now, in a couple of years, you're still going to have another override come up. This isn't going to be a Band-Aid solution for 5 years, even if we put forth a 2.4 million.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
I would argue that's a reason not to start from a point where we're basically admitting a partial defeat. So we can't change outside of lobbying or town residents lobbying their representatives at the state legislature to fix this. This is a structural problem in the Chapter 70 funding and the way it's impacting rural schools. And it's, it's also a fundamental problem with Prop 2.5. And also the understanding, I believe, of the overall, spirit of Prop 2.5. It was never supposed to be, and I'm editorializing a little bit, but it's not supposed to be a moat that blocks all property taxes. It's supposed to give voters the ability to choose to support important core services, but not be subjected to the whims of the select board or the mayor, et cetera, for things that are not core services, that are, extraneous to, the needs of the town. I think, to John's point about having, it's not even aspirational. This is just what we need. The bigger numbers, what we need to provide level services. And I think to start from a point of partial defeat, we will have additional overrides in the future until, the foundational problems, with the state laws are adjusted. So, why not take a chance to, get the best position to lead forward for the next few years?
Valid point. Reggie?
And I would add to that, that there's still the strategy too. If I was a voter and I had the option, I'm going to have to approve an override, well, this one's smaller than that one, I might just gravitate to the small one. It'd be a lot easier for a voter who is, kind of coming over to do a half move rather than a full move.
Which is probably what will happen. But then we'll never be accused of sandbagging them. We told you this is the number we wanted. This was our compromise. So if we have to come forward in another year or two, we've already set the record.
What I would say, Reggie, to that point is that you end up in the same place. If you just start at that middle number, then you never have a chance to potentially get the additional funding for needed services. You end up at the same override if everyone decides, to take, option B. What I would request, Scott, to kind of, move from the budgets with the overrides is, I think a really important, piece of information for the voters is what are the cuts without an override? Because, we saw this last year, as numerous people have mentioned at the school committee meeting, both the school committee itself, that there was this belief that we find the money somewhere. These cuts are kind of the sky is falling and it's a little bit of Chicken Little, but those were concrete cuts at Norris. What would the cuts be? We have, a structural deficit that's over $2 million. What are the cuts if we don't get that override? And I think that is what empowers the voters to really know what's at stake.
Well, I just wanted, before I get to the list, I just want to point out that I didn't ask the department heads to do the wish list budget or anything like that. It's to maintain level services. So if we were going to go back, then I'd like to add some more, if we're going to do that override. I mean, why not 2.7?
Agreed, but I would argue that you put forward your suggested town administrator budget with an override. So that wasn't voted on by the select board and FinCom and was open to, further, movement. So would the potential cuts with a failed override. But at least it tells people directionally, that there is going to be significant, impacts again at the school because if you pull out Hampshire, it's about, 40% of the budget before you start allocating, benefits. So the school is going to take another hit with a failed override, probably right up against the minimum funding requirements. The highway department is going to take a hit. The fire department is going to take a hit. Across the board, we're going to have significant, draconian cuts. And I think the sooner that people know what's at stake, the better I think that they know, potentially how they want to weigh the cost, to their personal budget versus what they picture receiving from services from the town.
Well, you've got an idea of the cuts that you were talking about. You want to put those up?
I would, if we do increase, I would like to revisit the capital budget because the $350,000 I put forward was the bare minimum. And we have over $8 million in capital projects that need to be funded.
So can you just, I know the answer to this, but since you're live and on television right now, walk through that 350. Because that 350 isn't, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't, okay, we're going to take this 350, we're going to go do this one little project. It's not even 50% of the tanker truck that we need.
Oh, yeah.
So that 350 was going to be used for?
To enable us to go for borrowing, right? For
portable radios for the borrowing takes place in the year 3 for the ambulance, but $20,000 for portable radios, $9,000 for library shades, parking lot sidewalks for $54,000, projectors for North School for $8,000, carpet for $10,000, and here even we're looking at maybe some other alternative sources that we'd have to look at, so it doesn't even cover the stuff that we actually need. Sidewalks for $25,000, structural repairs for water mitigation in North School for $50,000, student laptops for $5,000, teacher laptops for $4,000, more additional water control for $6,000, a zero-turn mower for $25,000. We would budget for the street sweeper, which we're contracting for, so it would be half of it for how much we're currently paying for the contract, and the other half would be from the capital funds. Dump truck, we would borrow for $68,000 over the 5 years, and the second would come in after the 5th year. Stand-up mower for $5,000. Ductwork at the library, as well as the toilet and toilet basin 2 that are in disrepair. Town Hall HVAC for the senior center, general envelope, because if you can see, we have significant water damage on the second floor, as well as some other leaks. And then for cemetery, I have a request for $6,000 for, to continue with the design.
So that $350,000 is, I'm assuming, is the cumulative of that whole column C, right? So, but it's the thought that we would pay cash, and, or that we would, because you said borrow. Or
So
that we
for
would borrow,
example-
and then that money would be locked up for the 5 years on, and that's the principal and interest.
Yeah. So for ambulance, so we would make the order on FY27, but we wouldn't actually receive the ambulance for another 2 years. So we wouldn't start making payments for it until FY29. But without that, we wouldn't be able to borrow against it. Similarly with the, like the dump truck, for example. So we would borrow against that. Same thing with the street sweeper. So we wouldn't be able to afford cash with all of it. We'd have to borrow against it.
Right, but you'd get $350,000 one time.
No, it'd be $350,000 each year. It'd be its own dedicated part of the budget that wouldn't be able to be touched.
And why wouldn't you be able to touch it?
Because publicly, it's going to actually see it. Once we start borrowing against it, then we have to fund it.
Scott, do you believe that that reconciles with the belief, right? Just look at the override for Norris. There's this general belief, and I'm not saying it's representative across the entire our entire population of registered voters, but there's this belief that the school gets the override in 1 year, and in next year it's kind of filtered down to the general operational expenditures, right? I don't agree with that position. I think you can only look to year over year. Norris's budget increases. Even with the cuts last year, it still had a year over year increase. So even though you can't earmark the override, but I do know, right, that we can't guarantee that 350 necessarily goes each year. I think there's a trust issue there.
Well, no, you absolutely can. I mean, this is going to be its own budget item. So every year the voters can actually look at the budget and see, this is what we're paying the debt for the street sweeper. This is what we're paying the debt for the ambulance. This is the amount of money that we're paying for the shades. Additionally, once you actually borrow for it, this is not a debt exclusion, so it's not coming off its actuals. We actually have to owe it.
So what happens, because it's a line item in the operational budget, that's all part of everything else, what prevents somebody in year 2 giving the town moderator 2 written amendments to, because that is a line item that you can take that money out and you could allocate it somewhere else? What prevents that from happening?
They could, but it's no different than the short-term borrowing that we're doing for the highway heating system.
Well, it is different, because short-term borrowing means that you have a debt obligation, which is not part of the operation budget. It's on its own, and this is where I come back to, it's capital. Capital projects and capital vote and authorizations have their own set, and if we do it as a capital, and we put it into the capital fund, and we commit and we vote to pass $350,000 every year for 5 years, whatever the case may be, and the voters vote on it, then I agree with you, yeah, it stays that way. But if you just leave it as a line item within the operational budget, there's...
No, debt exclusion, I mean, to borrow would still require town meeting approval. So to borrow for the ambulance, that still has to go and approved by town meeting. The smaller items that we can pay cash for wouldn't have to be.
Okay, but I just asked you if that 350 was the year 1 principal and interest payments.
For some items. There's also smaller items that we'd have to cover the capital costs for.
With cash.
Mm-hmm.
So some of those $10,000, $5,000 ones that you put up there.
Right, we wouldn't short-term borrow for a $25,000 zero-turn mower.
So you're saying that every year you'd put in another 300,000 or whatever?
Yeah, well, that's the line item, that's the amount that we've dedicated in the budget for that. And like most municipalities, they have a dedicated amount for borrowing for those types of capital projects.
Can you give me, not tonight, but tomorrow, can you send me 2 or 3 communities that do it the way you're proposing it, so I can research it?
Yeah, I've worked in them.
How is the accrued debt service? Where does the debt service on that short-term borrowing show up?
The debt service would be under well, it would be out of that amount, but for right now, our debt service is in our budget.
So the annual capital line would be responsible for previously incurred liabilities? No.
No, it'd be for going forward just for capital projects.
Yeah, because the debt service right now is for what we've got in the books right now, which, can't quite read that, but that's, you've got,
But almost all of that is outside Prop 2.5.
Yeah, they're debt exclusions.
And the resulting debt from this would be within our 2.5 limit. Or as we expand it with the override.
so go ahead, Scott, explain.
Yeah, so like this is our long-term debt service principal right here. So that's currently separate. So if the capital is to pass, then we would be able to use that money to pay off the debt service for those, some of those. So it'd be some for cash that we pay for the smaller items, so it would allow us to do that, and then we would also be able to borrow against it.
Right.
So the main long-term borrowing.
We would not be responsible for those line items that you just showed us.
Right, it would be for its own specific debt. So we have bigger items like the bridges and safety things, and we have a lot smaller items that, but we don't have anything to fund those medium things, like a $800,000 ambulance.
Agreed. Question, isn't it to our advantage, though, to do it as a debt exclusion rather than within the budget? Yeah, does it leave us more room in the budget by just moving it out and putting it as a debt exclusion? Maybe I'm not understanding how it works.
Well, debt exclusion would have to be approved by the voters, and we need a consistent year after year ability to fund these capital projects. So a debt exclusion, it could be yes 1 year, no another year, but we need something that we can at least fund, these basic things.
Are voters usually supportive of debt exclusions for capital equipment in Southampton, or, I don't know.
No, I mean, we've had dump trucks that have been, I think 3 or 4 years ago, it was voted no.
What's our capacity within our debt levy ceiling? Because to your point, Reggie.
I mean, all of our debt right now is debt exclusions, except for the highway.
I know, but that's not what I asked. So there is a ceiling, there is a maximum that we can raise in taxation. We're not there. We can do 2.5 overrides up to the point, but we can't exceed that ceiling.
Right.
So by adding 350 this year, maybe 450 next year, whatever the number may be, we're pushing up against that ceiling. I'm asking, what is our bandwidth there? How much room do we have before we hit our ceiling? And
how much we can borrow?
Right, and we can't do a 2.5 override.
I have to check with Megan, but we have significant room for that.
To answer your question, that's
clarification,
where that comes from. Where if you're pulling it out of your tax base, your general funds, there's an equation, you can go on the Mass DOR and run it, and it'll tell you what your ceiling limit is. So we're beneath that, whatever that is, because the state's not gonna let us go above. So we can add capital in here until we hit that ceiling, right? But you can also, there's a mechanism for capital to be its own line item, have a capital budget, be able to vote to raise capital, $350,000 for 5 years, make it a line item and put it in there, and that money goes into that capital fund. What it looks like is being proposed here is we're baking it into the operational fund.
This is very similar to what Belchertown just did in their override last year. They did a $500,000 capital override into their budget.
So does it seems to be a question is whether this is protected as a line item being in the operational budget, though. I mean, what I'm hearing from John, it makes it sound like it won't necessarily be able to stay there all the time, that somebody could vote to make a motion at town meeting to move that out.
Yeah,
Or we could be in desperate times and say we're gonna zero that line out. Now,
Exactly.
if we have debt service.
I would argue, right, if it's in a one stop fits all override, I think it is up to the whims of the select board, future select board, and the voters, versus, like you said, John, a separate override with multiple years of funding. So if it's just in a regular, Prop 2.5 override, and we're in another fiscal, challenge outside of, restrictions by borrowing that we make, it's not, I'm not seeing how that's locked in for multiple years if it's lumped in with a regular override.
Well, it's really no different than how we bonded for the dump truck in 2020. it's not a debt exclusion, it was just a basic borrowing that was approved by town meeting that the town did, $36,000 a year. I mean, right now.
But that was one item, not a recurring
But they
stream.
they voted on a single item for $36,000 for X number of years. It was clearly defined. Here, we're just voting on a dollar amount.
Right, and that dollar amount will be used to borrow, so once town meeting approves it, just like they did with the dump truck, that'll be locked in.
But
What's
you
the
ju-
mechanism?
But you just said something, you're not going to borrow for all these items. You're going to pay cash.
For some smaller items, absolutely.
So if I'm confused sitting here, how am I going to be able to explain to the constituents that they should support this?
But if I'm understanding, it, or not understanding maybe, but out of the 350, so suppose there's, whatever, 150,000 that's small items
Mhm.
that could be paid for with cash. So then you've got a couple $100,000 that you would use to be able to go out and borrow. Once we borrowed for, whatever, the street sweeper or the ambulance, town meeting would have to approve that.
Mhm.
Town meeting would therefore see that that money has been used for those purposes as long-term borrowing, right?
And as you can see, we have a schedule over the next 10 years, talking to all the different department heads and all the different departments about what we estimate. Now, it's going to be fluid over the next couple of years. It's not going to be locked in. Some things are going to change. Maybe the salt shed roof can be postponed 5 years. Maybe we have to move it up. But that allows us to have some flexibility and actually borrow against some of these things.
Here's the part that I can't get through, Scott. So we're obligating, the budget and the town for the borrowings that we do in year one. But it's going into, the regular 2.5 levy, right? The base as an override. So in year two, it's just in there. It's not dedicated. So in year two, either at town meeting, like John mentioned as a possible scenario, or just based on budget constraints, I don't see the guarantee that will continue to go towards capital. Only the year one, the long-term borrowings that you're going to incur in year one are locked into the budget. In future years, future expenditures, future borrowings are not guaranteed.
I don't agree with that. I mean, first of all,
What's the
it's the transparency. I mean, first of all, you have to have a plan. So we have a 10-year capital plan that very clearly says how we're going to fund it each year. If someone wants to raid that for another department, then and it passes the voters, and that's what it is.
So you're on the right path. We could have a capital plan. If we had a capital plan 10 years out, over 10 years, and we presented it to the voters, and the voters approved that capital plan, then yes, I agree with you. Then we can fund it, and it creates the capital thing. Right now, we're sticking $350,000 in the operating budget, and say we go to portable radios for $20,000, but we don't get the specs out there, we miss the deadlines, we actually don't issue a PO for it. Where's that money go? Because at the end of the year, it's in operating, it falls out the bottom line, goes to free cash. How are you restricting that money from
Well, we
that?
could go to another item that we could fund in exchange,
Right,
and we just
so-
substitute it out.
We're getting very loose here with it, where if we just utilize the existing, there is a mechanism in Mass where you can fund a capital project, where you can lay out a 10-year plan, here are the buckets, here's the total annual cost, or the cumulative cost over 10 years, divide that by 10, here's the annual allocation he's done, town votes on that, and then that becomes a permanent appropriation that goes into the capital fund that can only fund those projects that the voters voted on. And if you want to get fluid and switch gears, you got to go back to the voters and say, here's why we got to do this, and get their consent. We can't just dump it in here and hope that.
But that's a bureaucracy, that's just not sustainable, like even.
That's what the law says.
But even this, I mean, looking at the Belchertown model, this is exactly what Belchertown did. And you need some flexibility in this stuff. You can't just lock yourself in for 10 years and say, that's it for the next 10 years, and we hope the dump truck doesn't break a little bit prematurely. Or, hey, you know what, this roof can last another 5 years, but the capital plan says we got to do it now.
I think
so we're
if you
gonna do
need
it.
to make an adjustment and you go back and articulate it to the citizens of the town, because we are a town and not a city, that they're going to go along with it. They're going to see that it's there, and we got to make an adjustment in the middle of it. But there is a mechanism and a process to do this, and not leave it at the whim of the elected body that's sitting up here, even though this is the best select board there's ever been, or the town administrator, because 10 years, 15 years from now, you're going to retire, and we're still going to be on this capital program. Again, I'm in favor of this. I just don't think the vessel you're using to get there is the best course of action.
Well, I would just say it's no different than what we do other borrowing currently.
When we do borrowing, any other borrowing right now, we go to the voters, we articulate to them what the debt service is going to be, what the lifespan's going to be, the vehicle is going to be, or whatever, the project's going to be 10 years, or the lifespan's 10 years, this is what it's going to cost, and this is how long we can borrow for it and amortize over it. We lay out that whole picture to the voters, and then they vote on it.
But we didn't go to the voters for the highway heating system last year. We went to town meeting and they approved it.
For X amount of dollars.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
Yeah. So you got the ask for X amount, and you asked for it, and you
town
can't
meeting.
change that.
Town meeting, well, that's.
And you can't change that. You can't say, well, no, we're not going to do the heating now. We're going to take that money and we're going to go put in, air duct work or whatever the case might be, without going back to the voters. So here, it sounds like we're asking for a blank check, and this is kind of what we think we're going to do, but we want to remain fluid so we can bounce around if we want to.
Well, I mean, every year this has to be looked at, and that's why I want to do the capital, put the capital underneath the finance committee instead of a separate committee, and have the finance committee look over this.
So we'll have a capital budget,
Yeah.
which follows the capital plan that the DOR spells out on how we do it, that projects out 10 years.
It doesn't have to be strictly by the DOR. We can do it like this method.
So every time we go our own way because we think we're better than the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, they come in here and tell us, no, you got to change it. $175,000 last year because we thought we could use more of our overlay instead of just following the calculations.
No, this is a set line item that we can use year after year for capital projects. I don't understand why.
Is what you're proposing the only way that this can be done?
This is the most easiest and common sense way to do it.
That's not what I asked. Is it the only way that we can achieve what you're trying to do?
Do you want to put into a stabilization fund?
Okay, so question
Do
on
that,
question.
but then we lose the flexibility because now we have to call a special town meeting.
Well, I'm sorry, for $350,000, I don't necessarily want to give flexibility. I want to know exactly, if I'm putting my taxpayer hat on and I'm at the ballot, I want to know exactly what I'm being asked to spend my money on, and I want to do it. I don't want to say, oh, I trust them to take $350,000 a year, and I'm sure this will get taken care of.
Well, I trust our department heads, and I trust our finance committee, and I trust our select board and town meeting to be able to make these types of decisions. I trust Randall to be able to say that he can extend the life of a mower an extra 3 years, or that he absolutely needs it this year, or that the police chief needs a new car. Or a cruiser. I mean, I trust our department heads when they submit their capital project. I trust that they're able to do it that way.
And this is the plan that they proposed to you in terms
Yes.
of what the scheduling is for these various.
I sat down with each department, I went over their capital plan, I said what can be delayed, what can be other sources, and what could actually be, what could we borrow for? And they're very accommodating, some things that we're not gonna be able to afford, like an infield dresser, that might be something that the Parks Department's gonna have to do. Is that a necessity? Probably not. But I think an ambulance is definitely a necessity, and I think a pumper truck is definitely a necessity.
Scott, I think a clarification is needed. So you just mentioned establishing another stabilization fund. My understanding is that Prop 2.5 overrides cannot be earmarked in future years to a stabilization fund. It has to be funded through appropriations. So yet again, this is something that's going into, the overall levy, after the override, if it passes, that is not guaranteed in its application outside of the debt obligations that we take on in year one.
Yeah. Right. I mean, the idea behind the transparency is if we go to town meeting and we say, we need this part as a Prop 2.5 override, and then in year two, we see, oh, there's only $200,000 in this budget versus $350,000. What happened to that $150,000 that we approved last year that's supposed to go to mowers and water mitigation at Norris School?
I don't disagree on that point, but what?
I mean, there has to be some, it's the transparency, but also the accountability that the voters have to hold in both town meeting and at the ballot box.
And that's the same argument why an override for the schools, even if it was the only thing on the budget, just like last year, I've said this many times, the voters hold the town accountable on that future expenditure. But John's proposing, unless someone is pointing out an error in his understanding of the law, a more concrete way to apply, these funds.
It's utilizing the capital committee, which I don't think we've changed that bylaw yet.
We haven't yet.
Right.
It was hopefully
So
going to be on
we're-
on the town meeting coming up.
Well, call for articles is open, but
Exactly.
the town has a capital committee right now. So we could put forward a plan of, hey, here's the schedule that the department heads have put together, put it out there, let people see it, let them see what we're spending the money on, break it down year by year. There is money in the account, right? So to the earlier point that there is some cash to spend. You could do that. This is what we're going to spend it on. We want to start building up here. We want to do an exclusion, non-operating funding mechanism to put the funds into the capital committee. Once it goes in, and if the capital committee works within the existing structure, under the current structure, I realize that we're thinking about changing it, the capital committee meets, does its report, scores it, and then goes to the voters and says, here's the money we have, here's what we want to do, and here's how it's going to fund, and they vote on it. And if it passes by majority, it passes.
This budget would be not under the town administrator select board, but under the capital committee. They would make the decisions on how to appropriate this money.
That's what you'd be proposing.
So it's no different than what we do now. They meet with the department heads, they develop a budget. It's just more efficient if we have FinCom serve also as a capital, because they're in all the different budget hearings already, and they're already meeting with everybody. And it's part of a bigger picture of how the town operates.
And if Margaret's already left, she left, but Margaret and I are on the capital committee, and this is not how we do it right now. This is where we need to get to with the 10-year plan and have everything spelled out and then fund it that way. But it means that the money, when appropriated, is earmarked and is locked away in the capital account, and it can't be redirected to pay for wages, as an example.
And how is this any different from when the voters voted for the additional EMT or the first responder? And, they voted, we said we're gonna do that, and then that didn't happen. So how is this gonna be protected the same way? You know what I'm saying?
Well, because that vote did a one-time increase in wages in the operating, and then in year two, to Doug's question earlier, that money, the jobs didn't get filled.
Right.
So if they're not filled, you don't get them the next year, and then we hit this crisis.
But I fear that this would be the same thing, because it's, you know what I'm saying, it's gonna get redirected.
Correct. Even if the end intent is not for that to happen, that's what the perception's going to be in the public.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we're going to solve this issue tonight. I think we've heard opinions on this. Where do we want to get to? It's almost 8 o'clock.
So I'd like to make a motion that for our next meeting to be scheduled outside of our regular Tuesday night meetings, right? A dedicated meeting just for this, that we see a level service budget, a proposed budget from the town administrator, based on the work that he's done with the task force and what his...
Proposed being the ask? Or?
Well, I assume, what I ultimately want to go before the voters is a level service requires an override of X. A proposed budget, which would be less than that one, of this is what we can get through with, this is what we think we need, which is, with maybe some tweaking, Scott's pretty close to that now. And then, if the override fails, here's where we are.
So just to be clear, so like if we were gonna use that model, I'm gonna throw the numbers out. The level services would be the 2.6 override. The proposed TA would be maybe the 1.7, and then the third number would be the catastrophic final number, right? Just for
If the override
food for
fails.
thought, to make it palatable to everybody. Is that what that's what the vision is, right? Yeah.
And then we meet, and
So there's 3 budgets, is what you're saying?
yeah. And then we meet whatever night that's going to meet, and by the end of that meeting, hopefully, we can zero in on what the final numbers are going to be.
Okay, what's anybody's availability? We're not going to have a meeting normally?
Well,
huh?
You need a vote.
Yeah, no. We have a motion on that, too. We need a second, though. So that's the motion. Three separate budgets. So I'm hearing one that's a level service budget, which is?
Basically what the department heads were asked to do.
Right.
Submit their budget for level service, whatever that is. If for some reason there's a compelling reason to add to it, I'm open to listening to it, but that would be difficult. But
the Norris ask, for instance?
Well, so to me, the Norris vote was level service, and then the Hampshire Regional, we can't change that number, so it is whatever they approved Monday night.
I thought Norris was partially restorative.
The local school committee, their budget that they passed was restorative.
What would their level service be then? What would
Well,
their
it's level service
number
to
be?
FY '25. So so I guess you could say it's level service plus, but it is basically, starting to climb our way back out of the failed override last year.
Okay, I'm a little confused because I thought there was.
Let me clarify, since there is a motion on the floor, Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
let me clarify my spot. The ultra ask is what every department head put forward, and by department head, I'm including the local elected school committee, is their number, plus the department heads. If the town administrator believes that we need to add something to that, because I would suspect a land use planner would be in there, because that was in last year's budget, but if for some reason it's not there and it needs to be there, fine. That's our high watermark. Our mid watermark is somewhere around what's being proposed right now, around 1.7, right? Which would be using the placeholder number that was for Norris. Right? That was in there, that got to that 1.7. But whatever that number is. And then override fails, and we need to come all the way down on whether it's the 1.7 or the 2.4. What is that?
Okay,
Second?
all right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Planner in there.
So, the question would be, when we can possibly meet on this? What's our timing here?
Thursday evenings.
Thursday? Not this Thursday.
Does this qualify as an emergency meeting, that we could do it tomorrow?
I don't think so.
So Thursday would be out, right? Because it's not 48 hours.
We don't have 48 hours to notify.
I missed that. What was the question?
And I would also suggest that when we do meet, that if we can't meet upstairs, if we can reconfigure these chairs down here, then
Post whether it's
Be easier to actually meet upstairs.
within our 48 hours
Sit
or
around
as
the
an
corner.
emergency.
Sit around the table, it's a lot easier.
Lucy gave
What's
us
a
some
good night for folks?
indication.
FinCom, are you, what's your availability as well?
Excuse me, is the select board considering this as an emergency meeting, or?
I don't think it
So
qualifies.
I think we'd probably,
Wednesday or Thursday of next week? Well, Wednesday, Thursdays.
Thursday, Tuesday doesn't sound like it's working, so Thursday next week?
Wednesday would work as well.
So Thursday, that would be the 26th?
When can we have a quorum? What days of the week next week? Okay.
I think we're good on Thursday.
Thursday, 26th?
Thursday?
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, Thursday, the 26th at 6 o'clock?
6 PM?
Are we having fun yet?
Oh, yeah. It'll be better. Okay, let's go for that, I guess, at this point in time.
Ready to adjourn?
We don't need to go through this list at all tonight, then?
I can, if you like.
Did you want to go through this list that was handed out tonight?
I mean, the three budgets are basically already done. It's the 2.2 that I did a couple of weeks ago and the 1.8, and then I'm ready to go forward with the catastrophic cuts tonight.
You want to talk through what this list is, or wait until next week?
I'm okay talking through it as long as it's just clear that this is the initial, this is not set in stone. This is just the initial thought before us. This would be catastrophic cuts.
I mean, do you think it's more appropriate for next Thursday? This would be the third, you know what I'm saying?
Well, it might be good to read it into the record and
Okay.
run it through right now that, and this,
And the revenue's mostly set. So we know what the cuts, we know what the number that has to be cut. So it's not like revenues are moving and it's going to drastically swing. Oh, you don't have to actually make cuts of 2.4, you have to make 1.8. No, it's mostly locked out.
Yeah, I mean, we've still got some undecided amounts in revenue, given the state budget, right? But I mean, it's not, we've got a general sense of where things are.
Directionally, it should be correct.
So Scott, this would be a possible, if the override fails, is that correct? Let's just set the stage as to what this would be, and not knowing the amount of an override yet, but if an override
Scott, if you could blow it up a little bit.
failed,
So this is assuming the 1.8
okay.
override. So if the $1.8 million override did not pass, this is where we would have to do on the municipal side. So the assistant town clerk for $25,000. The police overtime would be cut by $80,000. And that would also have to be funding the increases for any arbitration.
Scott, would it be appropriate for you to give some context on what some of these impacts would be on services? So for example, based on our police chief's, input, that reduction in overtime, that's covering shifts when the officers have vacation, doctor's appointments, sick days. So what that reduction of $80,000 actually means is we will have shifts where we only have one officer, and we will need to rely on municipal aid. So, or mutual aid rather. So if you are in a bad situation, you may be faced, or a hypothetical, taxpayer in a situation would be faced with longer response times. So I think the $80,000 just looks like a number, but what that actually means for the, the level of service we provide, I think is more telling.
Right. Well, for example, the library, so I know that there were some people that wanted to completely close the library, but I really feel that we need to have at least one employee in each department, no matter what. And that's kind of like the minimum standards that I wanted to have to maintain departments. So when you look like the town clerk, that would leave only the elected town clerk. The police department overtime, that would basically fund wages, but if we can't even get through this, it might be even a reduction in police force. The library would have to be reduced, almost all positions except for the director, and the rest of the library would have to be staffed by either volunteers. So, it would maybe be open a couple days a week at most, never mind the reduction of
decertified
materials. The highway would lose at least 2 operators. So realistically, there might be 3 or 4 people on the highway department for that. The health, the administrative assistant, so the hours for the health department would be cut to maybe a few a week to be open to the public, because Claudia would
that
have
is
to
a
be
new
out.
year-over-year ask, though. I think that's appropriate to clarify.
What?
Is there currently a health department administrative assistant?
No, but there used to be, and this is restorative to that, and this is required for their level service.
Just on that one though, wait a minute. That administrative assistant in the health department's been gone for over 2 years.
And
So
that
that's
would
not
be split between the building and the health department.
For inspection
Yeah, but,
services?
okay, so that's new. That's not a level service. That hasn't been in the past 2.
To maintain level service, we would require that new position.
But if you never had it in the past 2 or 3 years, right? Because there was a volunteer in there. There was somebody in there going back 5 years ago, and the 2 department heads came forward and said, I believe the job became vacant. I'm not really sure how it became open, but they decided to split the comp, take it to themselves, and they would do the work. And it's been that way for multiple years. So this isn't a level this.
It is because of the increase
in what?
In what the health department is now doing. It's required. So Claudia is a very technical person. She can do a lot of the different things. She can actually go out and do inspections. So with this person, there still needs to be someone in the office to serve the public.
But
Let's just keep going.
Fine.
So highway, it would be 2 machine operators. One of those was actually downgraded from a mechanic. So again, Randall would be at maximum 6 people if they're all filled. Highway expenses, so these are the things that he uses to maintain equipment, so that would be cut. So not only would the capital be cut, but the expenses to maintain the current equipment would be reduced as well. So there would be, like the big storm that we had just a couple of weeks ago, we had a dump truck that blew a hydraulic line that had to be taken out of service. So there's going to be more things like that. The consultant that the health department uses, so all these problem properties that we have that are specialty, things like abandoned properties or toxic waste fields, things like that, abandoned homes, the things that actually impact the quality of life and neighborhood issues, that would be gone. The fire, the full-time current filled position, of the firefighter paramedic would be gone, so that's one that's where currently. The 4 council on aging part-time positions would be reduced, so they all have to be back onto grant-funded, whatever could be sustainable for that. The conservation agent would be completely cut, so it would go back to volunteer work. The cemetery, all the tree work would be reduced, so if there was an emergency that happened, it would have to rely on the highway department if and when they could get to it. The assessor administrative assistant would be reduced. I would increase the principal assessor to make it 35 hours a week, just because that's where we have to have the money in, but again, it's saving on benefits because it's a 28-hour-a-week position. The capital funds obviously would be gone. The employee benefits, the run-out claims that I'm trying to start for the next 5 years, that would be reduced by $10,000. Street lighting, we'd have to start turning off street lights for $10,000. The legal expenses, so things like the bridge or the arbitration cases that are coming up, all the health department stuff that we're trying to take care of, that would be in jeopardy. The select board adjustments, again, this would be for our open collective bargaining agreements. So any increases that we are mandated to provide through arbitration would have to be maintained within that department's budget, and that would probably be a reduction in staff, and then our IT capital reduced by $2,500. Total would be about $1.1 million, and that doesn't even get us to the complete.
So where are you coming up with the other $600,000 if we're working on a $1.7 million number?
It would have to be through education as well as other sources, like our fire department. We would have to reduce ambulance maintenance again. We'd have to cut further maintenance in our police department and our highway department.
Which is why I would advocate again that the Hampshire regional budget needs to be separate, standalone on its own. And I would advocate that we need to pass it, we need to take no action on it and table it and see if any other community does the same. Because otherwise, if we leave it where it is and it passes, whether the override passes or not, there is no adjustment. That means education is code for Norris. $600,000 from Norris, assuming there's nothing else left on the town side.
To echo that point, town direct costs for schools, that's basically locked down. So yet again, and I want to make clear that I don't think that this should be pitting Norris against Hampshire Regional, but it's also, in the event of a failed override, is it fair that Hampshire Regional has, basically, we just take the number and we put all of that pain on basically, our K through 6 population. And that doesn't mean that Hampshire Regional doesn't get to where they need to be. But again, in the event that we can't fully fund Norris, do we want an additional bite of the apple? Or, excuse me, do we want to basically give a directive to, the Hampshire Regional, the Regional School Committee, that they need to sharpen their pencils?
And the only way to give that directive is to vote it down or take no action on it. Anything but approve it is the only way to send a communication to that body. It's the only way, it's the only mechanism that number can get looked at, and then there's no guarantee that they'll adjust that number.
Yeah, so John, if we had, the full ask, the larger override number, and we took no action on the Hampshire Regional budget, or the assessment, and then, our override passes, it goes back to the Hampshire Regional School Committee, and they come back with the same number. At that point, we have a passed override. We can happily accept on the second chance.
And we'll also know if any of the other 4 communities had voted down.
I think, right now, I think Westhampton is the only community that's depending on an override right now, right? I think the other 2 communities are not depending on an override.
I was told Goshen will need an
Goshen
override.
might be. The other two, Williamsburg and Chesterfield, definitely not.
But Goshen was going to need an override regardless of what happened. It's the health insurance.
But if Goshen and Westhampton's override does pass, then they would accept the budget, I'm assuming.
That would be logical that they would pass it, yes. And then there's been times when we've been the only community that voted it down. but everybody else passed it. But this is different this year. Every community got hit with that 24% increase in health insurance. And every community is impacted for whatever reason, because Hampshire Regional couldn't exit that trust like other towns have. Whatever the reason is, I don't want to get into it here, there's a different elected body. But, so this is painful, what's here. I mean, and there's some things in here, okay, fine, but, I mean, I guess I would go back to the health assistant at 16 grand. We have a brand-new phone system. The health director they have a cell phone, voicemails can work. If you're telling me that I need to support, voting for this, I'm supporting eliminating the overtime from the police department, so there is none, so we will have shifts out there with a sole person on, just so there's an admin. Well, he's asking for 160. Now, the first thing, all our department heads do an outstanding job. Our police chief goes above and beyond and has his budget down to 80 cents. I mean, he knows where every single penny is. If he says he needs $161,000 in overtime, I believe him. So yeah, it goes down to 80, we get a couple things covered. And he's got that part-time officer, as long as that part-time officer stays with us and doesn't retire. But, and then the other issue is I would argue, it is safety. You know, I think our community is much more likely to require an ambulance than the fire department. That perhaps it's time we are truly a volunteer fire department, because that's $156,000 in wages. I mean, we become a volunteer department. Again, I'd rather make sure there are 2 people in the PD, in the city, in the town, if we're going to keep it. If we're going to keep the police department, it needs to be funded. We can still keep the fire department and keep them on call. Raises a bigger question when the people that are on the fire department aren't necessarily all town residents. But that's down the road.
I mean, I did talk to the chief about it before. Unfortunately, he's on vacation, but we're having a difficult time finding people to even do on-call right now, being paid, never mind volunteer. It's going to be a very difficult situation if we did that.
Well, it's difficult now, and we're throwing money at it. So that tells me that we're going to have free cash. If he's not spending the money he has now, because he can't fill the posts.
Well, it's not, they're not there 24/7. They're there, they respond to the.
They're on call.
Right, and Thursday training nights, and I'm just saying, given a choice of priorities and all that, you got an excellent starting point, Scott.
Yeah, and I think there's lots there to talk about. None of that would be palatable, no matter what, so. All right, so let us stop on this budget point for now. We've got a couple more issues on the agenda. Won't take long.
Does it involve finance?
It involves health insurance a little bit, so I wanted an update on that. And then we have to sign the warrant for the caucus, which is coming up as well. So let's just move on to the health insurance, get an update on kind of the timeline, what's going on there in the process so far.
So I started to meet with the school department last week. I gave a presentation on the health insurance. We have 2 other ones for retirees scheduled on April 7th and April 9th at the Council on Aging. The GIC released their initial rates last week. Health New England is going up by 5%, so that's kind of the target for that. The aggregate is about 8 or 9% total, so that's good news for us. For the additional insurances, I'm working with Steve, the broker. So looks like we're going to be going with the Hartford for our accidental and life insurance. MetLife is the best so far for dental. Altus and Delta Dental, their rates were a little bit too high. And then we're just waiting for IMED to come in for that. So once we have that, I'm going to send that to the unions to get their input, but there's really not many choices at this point with those types of things. They're all relatively the same. It's just a matter of rate shopping. And then we're just waiting for the GIC to release their brochures and their materials.
So is the open season still the month of April, or for signups?
Yep.
And you haven't had that full discussion with the town employees yet, or?
Not yet,
other
no.
than the school?
They were invited to the school one, but just the school, yeah.
So you're going to have a separate one in addition to the retiree one, or?
How did that go at the school? Did
I'm
anybody
still
show
here.
up?
Yeah, he's still here. Yeah, that's the point.
Was it well attended, or?
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of interest in the FSAs.
Yeah.
I think that was the good point that a lot of people were interested in, so.
Pretty good attendance? Or?
Yeah, about 50 people. Yeah.
Good.
Scott, I read that they were trying to push the weight loss drugs back into the GIC. Is that accurate or no?
They were taken out.
I know they were taken out, but then there's a political push.
I don't think they'll be put back in this year. Yeah, once they voted and the rates are already set, that's based on the GLPs being taken out. So I wouldn't see those being put back
I would
in.
imagine they could get back in this year at this point. It would seem very late to do that. Okay, so you've got those couple more meetings to do. So that's at least on track for what we know at this point in time, pretty
Right.
much. Yeah. Okay, all right. And then we have the warrant for the caucus, which I don't know. Oh, Lucy, I didn't even see you there. I'm so sorry. You're hiding behind Robert. I didn't even see you. I'm so sorry.
Takes me a little bit to walk.
Sure. Thank you. All right. All right, so this is basically, we have the warrant for the annual town caucus, which will be April 9th.
Yeah.
in
You don't have
this
to
room.
read the whole thing.
No, I won't. In this room. So we've got various positions open, and we will be meeting here on April 9th at 7 o'clock, right?
Yes.
And this is where people can nominate folks for various positions that are open. Now, just briefly, moderator, treasurer collector, select board, almoner, assessor, board of health, cemetery commissioner, community preservation, housing authority, library trustees, park commission, planning board, school committee, HRHS, school committee Norris, tree warden, and water commissioner. Okay? So this will be the time for people to come on in and do that. and I
Motion to
guess-
approve the warrant for the annual town meeting and cause the posting by the constable.
Actually, it's for the annual town caucus.
Town
Annual
caucus.
town caucus.
Town caucus, right.
Sorry.
All right, and motion and second? Second, Ellen, all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right, very good. We'll get that signed off on here.
Thank you.
Pass it down, thanks, Lucy, sorry about that. And then I don't think we have any other business that can't wait at this point in time. Anybody have anything? If not, we have one set of minutes to approve for February 12th.
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right, motion's approved. And I think that's basically it. Anything update on the audit at all happening? No, nothing new? How are we doing on free cash? We're getting there?
Just waiting for Megan to finish up.
All right. Okay, so I think at this point in time, unless anybody has any desires, yes, sir.
We don't, but
Yes,
you may want to give finance a moment to take a vote
I
on their minutes.
was going to do that. See what they have in there. If they want to do their minutes while they're still in session here? Okay, go for it.
A second? All right.
Okay, good. Is that your only other business? Yes. Would you like to adjourn your meeting first? All right, and motion to adjourn on our
Move to
side?
adjourn.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned at 8:15. Thank you, everybody.